the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of LightCast. I am your host, JP Bedell, with my co-host, Megan Mazzocco. Hey, Megan.
Hey, how's it going? Happy New Year.
And a Happy New Year to you. How were your holidays?
Thanks. Pretty uneventful. We had a little virus going on here.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, that's an event in and of itself. We decided to move, and so I have a new, somewhat barren office location to broadcast from tonight, but we're in and we're as functional as can be.
Well,
So today, guys, we have an exciting guest. Derry Berigan is our guest today, and she is the co-founder of LightThink University, and we're going to talk today about the opportunities in real-world design and education. So, Derry, thank you very much for jumping on the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So I want to start at the top. Tell us what LightThink University is and what makes it different, and give us the thumbnail.
Well, LightThink University works to empower every student to become a confident innovator who cares through multi-semester projects on real-world projects on campus. So we have students that it's open to any student, any year, any major. So we've had students from design, business, IT, psychology, theater. So a wide variety of students can participate in the program.
Okay, and so it's called LightThink.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a focus on lighting design, or is there a focus on lighting in general, or when you say real-world projects, give us a sense of what we're talking about.
So it can be it has to be a renovation project. So it's a 3-semester program. First semester is dedicated to light, which is the research component, the lighting anthropology aspect of our program. And then the second semester is translating the insights, the research that has been discovered into design. And then we break during summertime typically for actual renovation to occur. And then the third semester is doing post-validation research. So we understand what the impact of the design has been on the space, and understand the performance aspects of the research that comes from the last semester.
Oh, so okay, so the students when you're going through a research section of this, and these are non-design majors, or at least could be non-design majors. I guess you're starting from like real sort of, the very, very basics of how this works, right?
Well, it's very broad-based. So it's focused on using light as the innovation interface. So light is the foundation for our visual experience. 90% of what we know comes from the visual aspect of it. So we use light as a way to be able to talk about innovation with the visual experience. And that's the foundation. And what we teach is what lighting anthropology is, the study of people's experiences and interactions with space, things, and light. So light, people do not experience light as foot candles. They experience light as functional and emotional. And light is the unifying element for our visual experience. So really, when you start with any renovation project or any new built environment experience, you really need to understand, you need to remove the invisible relationships that designers typically have on projects, and you actually need to put names to faces. You need to understand what people are doing and what they want to feel when they're doing it, and that is what we focus on.
That's a fantastic starting point, and I wish you were teaching that to some designers that are working in the field.
I have a curious question. Because you are going kind of across this broad spectrum of many different students from it's kind of an interdisciplinary approach, and you're getting their perspectives. Kind of everybody's coming out of their silo and going into the classroom. So what kind of different perspectives or things have you heard or even learned as a teacher, hearing the perspectives of your students from all these different disciplines?
Well, there are several things that that we take for granted. And the old adage about communications is it's about expectations and assumptions. People's expectations and assumptions that are not articulated and defined at the very beginning. And one of the things that with the students that struck me is that they're still in the consumption phase, and they regard authority, especially regarding their environment. So when I walked into a classroom, for example, everyone was sitting in the dark, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and they were complaining that it wasn't they didn't have any daylight. Well, the shades were down, and so I said, well, why doesn't someone open up the shades? And they looked at me, and it's like the thought never came to their mind that they could change their environment. So empowering students as well as adults that typically they don't feel that they can change their environment because they're going to get in trouble, and this is something that they are taught at the very early age. I mean, I remember my dad saying, "Don't touch the thermostat."
Right.
You're taking control over your environment is an important element. So empowering them that their voices have an impact, and especially in the university level. The projects that we've worked thus far, it's amazing what we've learned from a research component, because you're actually dealing with the folks that are actually in those spaces, all the time. And designers do not, they tend to rely on their, quote, client, whoever it is, whether it's the director of facilities or whoever the project manager is, to provide them with, quote, user information. And what I always talk about is that, designers talk about users, or they talk about load capacity. Engineers refer to people as load capacity or occupants. Mm-hmm. We never really refer to the actual people, the individuals, and give them names. Marketing folks like to talk about personas, but actually going out into the field and talking to real people and understanding what their needs, their aspirations, and goals are is so vital to have a successful project.
That's absolutely the truth. Now, I guess my next question is, how do you or what values are you trying to instill in the students as far as how light can affect? Well, now let's say the research has been gathered. You have a strong sense for who's going to be in the space, what they're going to be doing, what their desires are. How are you giving students, especially students that may not have experience, the toolkit to sort of create light that's going to achieve those goals?
Well, first it's identifying the needs, and that gets into the functionality aspect of it. So when we just finished a classroom innovation project, and when we actually got into understanding what people need to do and want to do in those spaces, and what they want to accomplish, those elements can sometimes be in conflict with one another. But for example, most of the teachers do some sort of PowerPoint presentation. I started from lighting in the theater, home cinema business, and so a classroom really is now a black box theater.
Right.
And so when you think about that, and you talk about delivering 30 to 50 foot candles into a space and having overhead lighting, that lighting is typically 90% of the time off.
Right.
Now, students still have to take notes. So now you have a function, okay, and you have an idea of, okay, well, if you have, in order to enable lights, students to be able to see, typically the solution is that 50% of the lights are on and 50% of the lights are off. That's the low-cost solution for these things. Well, how does that make people feel? So if you are in the section where the lights are on and you're trying to see the PowerPoint presentation, what experience are you having, and what experience are you having when the lights are completely off? I mean, that solution does not take those students and the teacher into effect. They have just done the low-cost solution in order to deliver less light, less foot candles in that space. So our approach was, okay, so we need to know that students need to take notes, and we need to deliver a local solution. We need to figure out a new ceiling solution, and that's more of what we call the peripheral much, the ambient, what an atmosphere that has an impact on how it makes you feel. Delivering task illumination at each individual station is the key for students to be able to take notes and still have a good experience in their visual when they're watching PowerPoint or whatever the presentation is on the screen. So that's really key, is understanding that from a lighting perspective, you're dealing with understanding what the tasks are in the space, when those are happening, and what's the best solution to facilitate not only the function, but also what is the emotional impact that you're creating in the space as well.
And how many students at a time are working on a given project over the course of 3 semesters?
We typically do between 8 and 16 students. It's extracurricular, so they don't get formal credit for it, but it's part of their building their portfolio and having hands-on experiences. Is why students participate.
Sure. It makes sense.
I had a question. You mentioned that most of these projects are applied renovations. So I was curious, what has been maybe one of the most impactful renovations or memorable groups or environments that have been transformed, or is it typically just a classroom?
Well, we've done, the first project was a sustainable trade center. So we did workshops where they taught solar and biofuels and sustainable trades. That was a really exciting project. That was a LEED Platinum project that we started with. And then we did dorms and parking garage and hallways, and we just finished the research for reimagining what the classroom looks like. And as far as research that is groundbreaking and what innovation can come from that, the classroom has the most amount of impact.
Okay.
And so when you say it's a real-world project, I imagine there is, at the very least, an architect, probably an engineer, and the other, obviously the contractors and tradesmen are involved as well. How does that interface work?
So we have a professional team, so it's not just the LightThink team, but as you mentioned, we have architect, we have engineer, the electrical contractor, the general contractor. In the classroom case, we have an AV professional. So it's a group of a professional team along with the student team, and we all work together and collaborate. And it's not, one of the things that the students talk about is that they're not, from the design students specifically, that they're not what they call CAD rats.
Right.
That they are an equal part of the team. This isn't a higher up that the professional team dictates to the students what they need to be doing. This is a equal team to we establish goals at the very beginning of the project, and we work together to accomplish that. And it's not, there's no hierarchy. It's a very, very collaborative group, and that's, students really, really like that, and we love it too.
And it's part of the lesson as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. I mean, they don't typically, when you're doing an internship, they don't get to interface with the professionals. They don't get to interface with the clients. They don't get to do all of the activities that we do as professionals, and that's really key. And that, participating in our program gives them a really, at least probably a year advantage from students graduating.
Yeah, I mean, so my educational background is I studied theatrical lighting, and throughout my college career, I always sought experiences that were direct to the project. I didn't intern very much. I didn't assist very much. I would rather have lit smaller things and done it myself than assisted on big shows and just been like somebody that catted a drawing or whatever. And so I completely gravitate to that mindset. When you say you've got folks that aren't necessarily lighting or design majors, I mean, have you had what's sort of the variety of experience?
Well, I have to say one of our best students that have gone through the program was an IT major.
Okay.
And yeah, he's fantastic. He learned how to do AutoCAD, and I mean, just really got into doing the research, and just he was a fantastic student. So it's really interesting that anyone can be a designer. In fact, we design every day, and we've created this professional aspect to design. But if you think about the majority of people in their homes, they're a lighting designer. Right. And so, I don't like to, everyone is capable of design. They design their day every day. And so everyone is welcome, and they all have something new and exciting to offer from their perspective.
Yes, and I love that perspective, and so that gives a good idea or a good segue into sort of backing out a little bit. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about the philosophy of LightThink and where you'd like to see it go in the future, and sort of how you feel about it as a philosophical thing beyond the sort of nuts and bolts of the program.
Well, LightThink it's interesting. When we started working with students, I was a professional designer before I got into the education component, and this is a process that we've developed over the last 20 years. And when we started working with students, it was, how do you transfer our process and our methodology in a way that is teachable and replicable? And light part of LightThink is related to lighting anthropology. And it turns out that our name, LightThink, actually breaks down into our process. So light, L is for love, look, and learn. I is for interrelationships and invisible interface. G is for gathering the facts in the field. H is for how do you fix what's wrong and make better what's right. And T is for think forward to design. So light part of it is all about research. And then the think part of LightThink is all about translating that research into design, and it breaks down into our process as well. But it really gets back to the foundation. I mean, there's a philosophical aspect of it. One of the things that we talk about is what powers LightThink is something that my grandmother taught me, which is we used to call RCH, respect, consideration, and honesty. And so it really gets back to the real root of design and recentering it based upon the people who are actually experiencing and interacting with what is designed. And a lot of times we talk about people-centric, but that's usually based upon someone else's viewpoint on what the people need versus actual first-hand direct experience in the field. And that can come from a project manager, that can come from whether it's performance, and it's typically performance and budget and deadline that is the top priorities on any given project. And again, it's in codes. Codes are driving most of the design decisions, and we need to get back to basics.
Yeah. So my next question is, where can I buy your book? You mentioned to me that you're actually on a sabbatical right now, and you're
Yes.
writing a lot.
Yes.
So how did this book thing come about?
Well, I started about 10 years ago when we did the first project in Chicago, commercial project using LED lighting. And I did a 2-year, almost 50-state education tour, getting people up to date about the use of the technology and what best practices to use the technology and all that good stuff. And I've evolved over the years as far as getting back to basics. I mean, it's, technology was the exciting element. LED was something new and really created a new paradigm in lighting and got it revitalized and exciting to be in the space again. But there's still this, no matter where I was going, I would have people come up to me at the end of the session and talk to me, we never thought about people. And I would always be like, really? Wow, that's what you took away from that? That's so that's so basic. That's so common sense. And our approach, the lighting anthropology approach, was something that I developed in the residential. I started in residential practice before I went into commercial. And in residential, it was having dinner with the family that we were designing for. It was being in their home to understand what art pieces were important and what furniture and how they moved throughout the house. And it was really understanding the people component. And so when I started working in commercial, I just brought that from residential into commercial. And so that's what, when I was giving speeches, I would be talking about, and people would be coming up and asking me about this and where can I buy your book. And as I said to Megan, a book was not on my bucket list. It's not something I really wanted to do. But I had a group of college students in Sao Paulo, Brazil, who came up to me, and it was just at that moment where I was open and receptive, and they said, we want to get your book. Where can we buy your book? And I thought, okay, this is the moment. I'm going to have to really seriously do this. And it's also something really important for for LTU as well, for our students to be able to have a book to reference and to guide them through the process. So in 9 months, I hope to be done with the book.
That's really exciting.
Yes. And I need all the luck possible, because it's not something that this book is very, very daunting.
Yeah, book projects are like that. I tried to do, well, I shouldn't say I tried. I did do one. It was a very short self-published thing that I did as a guide for when the incandescent light bulb phase out went into law.
Right.
And it was, when I tell you, it was maybe, I think it was total 60 pages, and oof, that was hard. Writing like a real design guide, that's a daunting project. I admire you for it. So talk to me a little bit about, I just want to bring it back over to this idea of innovation. Do you think, because the lighting industry in general, I think, keeps innovation synonymous with technology. We sort of keep it, the theme of the industry for the last, 7 or 8 years has been LED and digitizing everything. And when I look at, on the consumer level, it's not really about changing lighting products as much as it is connecting them, right? It's a Wi-Fi enabled light bulb. It's
right.
Home networking. And, I'm not making a judgment about those products. I'm just, it strikes me that with LED, and I've made this comment on the show before, but we're so obsessed about how great LED is, and yet we keep trying to put it in the form factors that it's always exists, that light bulbs have always existed in, right? Like, So when you think about innovation, and when you're talking to your students about it, firstly, how do you define it, and is it more broad than just technology and the evolution of technology?
Well, typically, every time we do, we start with the research component and we do our in-the-field research. We typically find that we don't have a product to fulfill the need. And we found this in the classroom, and we've developed 3 products that were required because to actually complete the design appropriately for what both the teacher and the student needs in the classroom, there weren't products to fulfill it. Not from a technical spec standpoint, but from a form factor perspective. And those are key elements. And every time that we do it, whether it's commercial, since I've started in design, there's always been at least one missing link, if you will, that we need that research uncovered. And so from an innovation perspective, it is, it's not, I guess when I first started as a designer, there was this great, designers have this pressure to bear, if you will, to come up with this great new idea that has never been done before. And I go back to Isaac Newton, who talks about standing on the shoulders of giants before him. Is that there's really nothing new. It's all about context, and so it's context driven. And when you understand your context, that's where innovation comes from. Is you always find something new that's required and needed for that specific context that hasn't been done before. And it can be a product, it can be an idea, it can be control programming. I mean, it can be a variety of different things. And that's what's exciting, is that every opportunity, every situation provides a canvas for innovation.
And so, are you working with manufacturers to customize or versions of the products that already exist, or are you engineering from scratch, or how does that process work?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, we typically will find something, like, for example, the task lighting that I was talking about for the individual student stations. That's a modification of an existing product. But, for example, the ceiling element, that's something that we're working to develop from scratch. So it's a little bit of both. And it's also finding the right partners that want to be get out of the commodity mindset.
Right. And that's important. That's really important. And there are manufacturers across the country that do feel that way. But that's a conversation for another time. So how large is the program now? How many universities are you affiliated with, or school or colleges are you affiliated with? And is there are you looking to grow the program, or or how is it working?
Well, we've worked with 3 universities. We're in the process right now of developing a relationship with 2 new universities. We want to continue to grow the program, but that's all based upon now getting into the nonprofit world is all about fundraising and developing a fundraising base for these programs to move forward. The more funding that we have, the more programs that we can do. But that's our constraints.
Sure. And so three schools all in the Chicago area or elsewhere, or?
No, Santa Fe Community College, RPI up in Troy, New York, and then University of New Haven.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay, very good. This is all just from my own knowledge at this point. All right, well, Derry, is there anything else that we should know about LightThink, or anything else you want to tell us about? Because we've got another segment coming up, and our Lighting Vitals segment is on the way, and I wanted to know if you had anything else to tell us before we jumped over to that.
No. If you have any, Megan, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, this is this part of the show we call Lighting Vitals, where we talk about news from around the industry. And Derry, we would love it if you want to stick around and opine with us.
Sure.
Okay. Megan, you got something up, or should I go first?
Go first, but I have just a couple minor holiday news.
All right. So the first press release that came across the desk about a day and a half ago is that the Design Lights Consortium, or DLC, has released its second draft for networked lighting control specification, which is a lot of words to say that we're on our way to a DLC-listed control system once this draft passes. DLC, for the uninitiated, is the third-party seal of approval for lighting fixtures to receive rebate. Generally, it's relied on for rebate programs from utilities. For example, here in New York, Con Edison, PSE&G, the big utilities, you don't qualify for an energy efficiency rebate unless the fixtures you use are DLC listed. It's a way for them to, it's the good housekeeping stamp of approval. The fixture is efficient enough, it meets all the basic requirements. DLC moving into controls is kind of a piece of news because it was previously believed that that sort of wasn't what they were going to do, but the second draft release is out, and that means that soon enough, if you want your control system to qualify for rebates, it's going to have to meet a defined spec, which takes some of the burden off utilities and might make it easier to finance some energy retrofit projects.
Sounds good.
And Derry, in your with LightThink and with the renovation projects you're working on, I'm thinking more in New Haven and Troy, perhaps, than in Santa Fe. But is energy efficiency and rebatability and things like that part of the process, or is that not so much the focus?
It is. We have always strived for 80% energy reduction below whatever the most stringent ASHRAE that is that's in place, and so we are always looking to reduce energy obesity wherever we can find it. But I have to, from my own experience, in that whether it's commercial or university driven, is that when you get into the innovation again, get straying away from the commodity level, is that we've had such struggle with meeting energy rebates, even though we're 80% below ASHRAE, and it's proven, but it's because it's, if it's the product isn't DLC listed, and you have a manufacturer who is developing it based upon our specifications and doesn't have the financial incentive to pay DLC or another entity to be listed, that you penalize the most energy efficient projects because there's not a financial incentive for the manufacturer to pay the licensing or pay whatever fees that they require.
Yeah, it's a real challenge.
Well, that is really interesting.
Well, Megan, you are muted for a moment. Hold on. Sure. Okay. So, I don't know why Megan's mic is muted at the moment, but we will get that fixed.
Megan just needs to unmute from her side, I believe.
No, it says that AV Nation muted.
I didn't do it. All right, hold on. We'll edit this part out, but stand by. Let's find out why.
That's what it says.
I can't unmute you. Why can't I unmute you? Interesting. The loveliness of free. Stand by. You can't unmute yourself, Megan? If you go and unmute.
It says you.
There we go.
It
Okay.
worked.
Proceed. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it does that. Sorry.
No problem. So my first Lighting Vitals subject that caught my eye, it's very, very 30,000 feet elevation. It's going to the consumer side of things, which is kind of appropriate because I think right now in Vegas the Consumer Electronics Show is happening right now. So I'm getting a lot of interesting stuff from that, but so far nothing about lighting, which I'm surprised. But I did earlier, late 2015, right before 2016, get a release from Philips, and they said that they could bring the Times Square ball experience into your home with the Hue Fireworks app, which was available in both Apple and Android for only $1.99. So you could watch as your home was in sync and in real time corresponding to the colors of the New York Times Square ball drop. Of course, you didn't just have to have the app, but you had to have the Philips Hue bulb. But I mean, again, I thought, well, that's kind of a, it's a valid way to get people involved, to get them to maybe have this idea of I can control my lighting environment, and also to evoke a little emotion, a little experience and memorability that goes along with SSL technology.
Well, yeah, Hue has tried a couple of different integrations. They did that. They also did an integration where, during The Walking Dead, of all things, you could sync your lighting, your Hue products, so that the ambient light in the room would match the scene of the show. So if it was like the bright sunlight, your lights would come on at full and they'd be sort of like white. And then if it was like a firelit scene, like at night, everything would get sort of dim and orange, and and then when zombies came out, something spooky would happen or whatever. I think the Hue line is interesting. It's getting people thinking about lighting design in their homes, to Derry's point earlier, in a way that I think is fun, and I'm all for that. I have some quibbles with the product as an actual piece of lighting. I'm not thrilled with the white light it creates, and I think there are some other shortfalls to it. But as a piece of decoration and a piece of light art that people can access, I think it's a great thing for overall. Overall, I'm a fan.
Interesting. So the other thing that was funny or interesting is our former guest, Avi Moore of Light Switch Architectural, had done a LED kind of, it's a theatrical integrative experience at local Chicago Morton Arboretum. So I actually went to that and experienced it, and it inspired an editorial that I wrote and posted on LinkedIn about the year of light meets the year of the pedestrian. And I was kind of emphasizing the fact that lighting is the backdrop to any kind of civic life, especially during these winter months, when it gets dark so early and it's dark so much of the day. And I got a letter from someone named Rudolph in the Netherlands who's actually working on this project locally, and he said those two elements are so connected yet so denied in common design. And so I thought that was something interesting, and I just wanted to put that out there to plant the seed for anyone who's a lighting designer or even an urban planner. And maybe we'll have a guest on in the future to address that topic. And then finally, the thing that is a very kind of big picture that goes beyond lighting and into sustainability in general is the fact that resilience, there's some pilot credits for resilience that have been put into the USGBC LEED green building system. And then those credits are also now appearing in the passive house rating system. And specifically, one of them talks about how buildings and places, districts and communities can operate completely independent of the grid in a case of a state of emergency or something that we don't even know yet. And so I thought this was something that lighting designers who are working in public and government should definitely pay attention to and maybe push with their clients, because I think that's an up-and-coming idea. Yeah,
resilience is part of, or New York City is pushing the resilience idea. Really it was Hurricane Sandy that did it for us, because so much of the infrastructure was shut down. Parts of Lower Manhattan were underwater. It was a big problem. Right now, it's taken sort of very baby. I would say the steps are the most obvious things, like getting your emergency equipment. At minimum, I believe it's 8 feet above grade, so that water can get under it. But we're getting a little further along in terms of thinking about alternative energy as part of the plan. I was just at a meeting with one of our local colleges, which is also a place of refuge in an emergency. And one of the projects on the table is a solar cogeneration project that would potentially enable part of the campus to operate independently in the case of the grid goes down. So that people could come to the school and have a place with power and resources.
Just out of curiosity, is that something that you guys have considered in any of your programming?
So what? That was for Derry, not for me.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. When we talk about the L out of light is the interrelationships, and so when we talk about 80% energy reduction, we also think about, from like a classroom perspective, is getting them off grid. How can we facilitate, instead of thinking about a whole building, how do you just power, for example, just doing solar just for the lighting? How do you think in small steps instead of always thinking about the whole building concept? How can you start to do little things to create resilience and off-grid and solar renewable energy? That's always a component of it.
Okay.
But when you were talking about the pedestrian and lighting, there is a gentleman that just came out with a book last month, and he's an aerial photographer, and he's been using some new high-tech camera equipment and has been going around the country in a helicopter photographing cities from the air. And one of the things I saw an interview with him on Charlie Rose, and he was talking about this time that half of a city is lit with LED and half of it is still lit with metal halide or high pressure sodium, and the photographs are just astonishing. So if you I forget what his name is, but there's a fantastic book that is looking at the city and the impact of light.
Neat. I'll Google that.
Yeah.
The last little piece of news, and it's we're not breaking it here or anything, but just thought it was interesting. Third quarter lighting systems index was up 4.4% over the quarter, which is the largest jump the index has seen since 2008, and it's the highest the index has been since 2008. So the lighting industry roared back to life in 2015. We don't have the fourth quarter numbers yet, but overall that's a positive sign for the industry, and I think it's certainly, given the economic drivers in New York and California and places where energy efficiency are big, we're seeing the push for LED drivers, LED products, and lighting control systems is clearly there, because the demand has gone up year over year. The year-over-year growth was 4.8%, which is also very strong. Mm-hmm. So that's Lighting Vitals for this edition of the LightCast. Derry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Derry. I really appreciate you coming on the show and getting to hear about all of your latest adventures in lighting.
Thank you so much for having me. And I looked it up. The book is called Air.
Oh, okay.
Air. Okay.
Air.
All right. Derry, where can people find you, find LightThink, and if they want to get in touch and they've got a trunk full of money and they want to give LightThink a grant, how do they do that?
It is, you can go to our website. It's lighttthink.org.
.org. Got it. Lighttthink.org. Megan, anything else?
No, I don't have anything in my back.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us on another edition of LightCast, produced in partnership with AV Nation. The podcast is available wherever you get podcasts. You can find Megan on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn and on the blog and everywhere else. And thanks very much for listening.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.